Hi, I'm Alex and I welcome you to my Model Context Protocol application building video course. If you clicked this video, I assume that you already know what Model Context Protocol is. In this longer tutorial, we will practice and we will build an application with MCP. We will build this application with both TypeScript and Python. So this video course has two sections which will basically do the same, but one with TypeScript, the other one with Python. You can choose your section accordingly. Also, all the code presented in this video is already available on my GitHub page. You can check the description for code and for the sample project used in this video. And the features that we will cover inside this tutorial, we will talk about simple tools, about tools with complex applications, about tools that will return media files like images, and about MCP workflows. Let's see what we will build. So this is a simple web application, a web store in which we can order pizza if we want. We can select what we want and we can simply place our order. Well, we can place orders and see the pizza menu with images also from an AI application using an MCP. For example, with Claude, I can ask, what is the awesome pizza menu for today with images? And Claude will return me using MCP, will return me the menu and will also show me the images of this great AI generated, of course, by me pizzas. I can make an order at this point. I want to order 1 margherita and 2 pepperoni. Let's see if it understands what exactly I want. And yes, it will execute my MCP and it will make an order on my behalf. On my behalf, it will return me an order ID, and at this point I can ask, what is the status of my order? Let's see what I receive. And yes, it will tell me that the status of my order is received. Basically, this is what we will build. Let's now talk about the requirements for this video tutorial. You need to have either TypeScript or Python installed. Also, you should have Node.js and a package manager for Node.js like npm, or for Python you will need the UV package manager. Also, you will need a code editor like VS Code. I see no other reason not to use VS Code. And also, to get fast feedback about the MCP development, GitHub Copilot is a great tool. Also, of course, you will need at least basic programming experience to follow this tutorial. This being said, let's start to implement this MCP project either with TypeScript or with Python. Alright, so let's start to build our awesome pizza MCP. Let's look at this starter project first of all for TypeScript and Node.js. What packages did I installed? Well, when we want to first start this project, we need an Node project, an npm project, and my dependencies are at Model Context Protocol SDK, the types for Node, and Zod. Also, keep in mind that I have installed TypeScript, so globally I have the TypeScript compiler and also TSX for directly executing TypeScript code. These are Node dependencies, but I have installed them globally. Alright, let's now, what else do we have right here? I have a simple server, which the first step would be to check the initial configuration. This is the reason I registered a simple test tool that will simply tell me hello from the test tool. And I use this server in this main standard IO file in which I simply start this server when this main file is executed. If I simply want to run this server right now, the easiest way would be to run it directly inside VS Code and then invoke the tools with GitHub Copilot. For this I have in the .vscode folder, I have this mcp.json file in which I have registered this server, this TSX, which will directly execute TypeScript code, and then my main file. Let me restart this, and at this point I should be able to invoke GitHub Copilot. Let's see if this is working. I will say it, invoke the test tool MCP. Alright, and it ran the test tool. I'm seeing hello from test tool. This means that the initial setup for this server is working. Now, what we want to achieve with these tools, if we look at the website of our application, this is our awesome pizza website, but behind the scenes there is a server. So the website itself makes some HTTP requests that we have to make with our tool. So our first option would be to simply create a file that will make the HTTP requests. First of all, let's see how these requests look like. And if we look at the website, again, let me inspect everything. If I look at the network entry, if I refresh this view, you'll see there's a fetch, there's a request for the daily menu. Maybe I can make this bigger. A get for the daily menu and receive something back in return. This is what we want to implement also with inside our MCP. So this is the kind of object that will be returned when we will write an MCP tool that will get the pizza menu. Let's write this tool inside this class. For this, I will need a new file. I will separate the Node.js code that will simply make HTTP requests. I will call this API client TS. Our base URL, if we look back at the code, our base URL is this localhost 3000. This is the one, so I will copy this one, maybe /API like this. And since we are using TypeScript, this is an optional step, but it's very useful. We can see in the response of this call that we are receiving back a JSON object. Since you are using TypeScript, maybe it would be nice to have some types, since we already have this nice JSON response. What can I do? I can simply copy this response object. I can go to a browser and search JSON to TypeScript. I will open one of the first responses and I will paste right here my response. And now on the right I can see a much better or much powerful structure of the response I'm getting. I will simply copy these types right here. I will put them lower down the line and I will make one type of one of them. We don't need to export this. We will only use them inside this class, maybe. So here I want to make this a type, and this, let's call this menu response. We have a success flag, some data. We don't need a separate type right here. I will simply put it nicely right here and format this a little. That's great, and remove this other interface. And I guess that this message should be an optional field. So we have a strong type for the menu response that we will get. Now let's write a function that will simply make a fetch request to get the daily menu. So the signature of the function will be this one, export async function get daily menu, and this function should return a promise of menu response like this. All right, let's wrap this inside a try catch block, and I will say right here, maybe const response. We can make a fetch request to our base URL, and then we want to go into, if we look back at the website, because I don't remember exactly, /daily menu. This is what we want. So we want base URL /daily menu like this. And also let's add some parameters to this request. The method is get, and let's also add some headers. I will paste them because I don't want to type everything right here. So I will say accept application JSON, and content type should be application and JSON. All right. If we have a successful response, so if we have right here response okay. If this is not the case, let's simply throw a new error. Otherwise, we will simply transform the JSON, the response into JSON, and return it as menu response. And in case we have another error, let's simply return something else. Let's say that we will return an object with success false with the message, the error message, and some empty data. So this is our initial fetch function that will get the daily menu. Let's test it lower down the line before using it inside an MCP server, just to see if everything works. So I will create a new file. I will call this test.ts, and I will simply import this function from upstairs. I want to put this inside the src. So from the API client, we first of all want to import this get daily menu and wrap this inside an async function main, a main function, and I will say right here const response await get daily menu and invoke this main downstairs. Alright, let me simply invoke this test function right now with tsx. So tsx src test.ts. And yes, of course, we need to print this response one more time. And yes, our HTTP method and request works just fine. Now all we have to do is to simply use this function into a MCP tool. So the last step inside this lecture is to invoke this daily menu and create a new tool inside our MCP client. Inside this server, let's now register a new tool. I will copy this other tool because I'm lazy, and let me first of all import all the functions from the API client. So I will import everything as API client from our API client like this. So the name of the function will be get pizza menu, the title will be get pizza menu, the description will be returns the awesome pizza menu. Very nice. Now the callback that will do all the work will be an async function. So I will make this an async function. Let's first of all get the response menu. So here I'll say const response menu is await our API client, get daily menu. That's great. And now let's wrap our tool response into an array. So here I'll say const tool response is an empty array for the moment. And now let's iterate over the response menu. And for each menu entry inside this daily menu, let's add an entry to the tool response. So if we have a response menu success, then for each entry inside the data entry, we will push a new entry to our tool response, and we will need an object with type text, and this should be a constant, otherwise TypeScript will throw an error, and the text will be the menu entry name. If there's no success right here, let's just put a response with the error message. This will be an error message. And otherwise, if we don't have a success, again, let's simply return back the tool response like this. And I will remove this and format this a little. That's great. It's time to test this initial API client. So if I need first of all to restart the server. That's great. Now we have two tools. And now if I go back to GitHub Copilot, let me close out all the files, and I will ask, what is the daily menu at Awesome Pizza? All right, it will invoke this MCP server, this MCP tool, and I will receive back the response. That's great. So we were able to write our very first tool for our Awesome Pizza daily menu. In the next lecture, we will do the same, but we will also return the images from our application. So we are able to even show images inside our MCP clients. Let's see how we can do this in the next lecture. Most data and websites over the internet will show us a nice text, but also if we see an image next to the text, the response is much more engaging. And if we look at what we get also inside this website, along with the entry title, the entry description, we also get an image URL, which lives on the server. And when we request for the menu, we also receive an image URL, and it shows us the address of the image inside the server. Well, is there a way to also show this image when we make an MCP call? Yes, there is, and this is what we will implement in this very interesting lecture. So what we want to do, we want to create a tool that will also return us this pizza menu, but not only the entries, but also show us some images. Let's see how we can do this. It's fairly simple, but very interesting. I will simply start the previous tool that we did in the previous lecture. Because the API call is exactly the same, we will want to get the daily menu, and this response will also contain the image URLs. But this time I will say get pizza menu with images. The title will be get pizza menu with images, and I will simply add with images everywhere. And this way the AI, the LLM, will know to select this MCP tool and not the other one with images. All right, we again get the daily menu, the response menu. We get it from the server. We again build a tool response array. We again check for success, and we again iterate through each menu entry. But to make things a little clearer, I will not use this for each function from JavaScript. I will simply use a good old for loop, because we will have a little more work to do. So I will make a for loop right here, and I will see right here const menu entry of this response menu data. So we will iterate over this data. We want to extract the image URL. So here I'll say const image URL, and we simply have to somehow combine the two data. If we look at the image URL, this is the image URL on the server. So we somehow need to combine the address of the server with this asset's image URL. So in order to do this, I will simply do it like this right now. We need the address of our server. For the moment, I will simply hard code it. So our application lives on localhost port 3000. Then we have a slash, and then if I look back at the image, I can even open this image inside a new tab, and you will see how this looks like. So you will see it's localhost 3000 / assets. So basically this is the path inside the backend for this image. So right here slash, and we have right here the menu entry, and then we have the image URL. So this is our image URL. Now we somehow need to convert this image into a base64 image. And in order to do this, I will put this inside a separate function to make things a little easier to read. So we want to convert this image into base64. So we will receive this image URL, and we will return back a promise of type of string. I've called this function image URL to base64. Again, I will first of all start with a try catch block in which we are making a fetch request to this image URL. We make a fetch to this image URL. That's great. If this response is not okay, I will simply throw an error. And we now have to simply convert this into an array buffer. Let me put the code on the screen and then explain it. So we are simply converting this response into an array buffer. Then we are creating a buffer from this array buffer, and we are returning this buffer to string base64. In case we have an error, we can simply print it and throw it back. That's great. So this will simply return us the base64 encoding of the image. This is what the MCP will understand, and it will be able to print it. So we have the image URL, then we have the base64 image, and we can invoke our function, and this is our base64 image, still a string. And now we are able to push our response to our tool response. And this is basically the new MCP stuff inside this lecture. So I'll call tool response. I will push again an element, an object containing the type, and this time the type will be image, and I will make this as const, otherwise TypeScript will throw an error. The data will be our actual string, base64 string image, and very important, also we need to provide a MIME type. And this MIME type, if we look back at what we get, is this PNG. So this server, these images are in .png format. This means that the MIME type is image/PNG. If you have other extensions of images, you need to specify a different MIME type. Otherwise, your application won't work. So this is our image. we also should push the text of the entry. So I will copy this and push also the text, because we don't only want the images, we also want the text. So this one will be text as constant, and I will specify text, and for text will be our menu entry name. And basically this is our implementation. This pushing of the image and converting it into a base 64 image. We are done with this implementation. Let's see if it is working. One very important point, if we look back at the image, you will see this is a very, very small image, almost like a thumbnail image. And the reason I chose to serve these images is because MCPs, as I'm recording this, have a size limit. I guess 1 megabyte or something very limited when it comes to data. So if I will put bigger images, which are bigger in size, MCP will simply not be able to display them. This is the reason. Either you have very small images on your server. This is one solution, as I did it right here. Another solution would be to simply transform your images at this point. So you handle them right here, you use a image library and you make them a little smaller. To make things easier, I made them smaller directly from the backend. Now let's test this. I will simply go again to MCP JSON. I will restart this. And let's see if everything works as it should. I will start GitHub Copilot. And I will say, what is the daily menu with images at Awesome Pizza? And let's see what we get. Alright, and we are getting somewhere. The GitHub Copilot implementation still has some limitations. You can see I can see the images right here. If I want to, I can hover with my mouse over them. I don't see them here, but we are on the right track. Let me also show you how this MCP looks like in Claude. So let me test this also inside Claude. Again, I have registered this MCP server and I'm asking what is the daily menu with images at Awesome Pizza. Let me run this. It will know that I have to run the get pizza menu with images. I will allow once and I'm receiving a response, and if I extend this, I see nicely the images right here. So this was the way we can add images to our tool responses with TypeScript and MCP. In this lecture, we will create a MCP tool that will make an order to our Awesome Pizza website. And first of all, before creating this tool, let's understand how placing an order is happening inside this website. If, for example, I'm pressing 1+ right here inside this margherita pizza and maybe 2 pluses, let's say I want to order 1 margherita and 2 pepperoni pizzas. Let's see what happens if I go lower down the line. I need to specify a name. I will just enter a name, and let's observe right here the requests that the website will make in order to make this order. If I click place order right now, a new request will be made by the website. And the same, basically what we need to do is to make the same request but from an MCP tool. And how this request looks like, if we look at the payload, maybe I will show this source. You'll see this is a JSON object. I won't parse it anymore because it is pretty simple, which requires a sender field and then some contents. And the contents are an array of objects with name and quantity. And first of all, the first step would be to somehow create a type for this order details. And the objective of this lecture, and basically the most important thing, would be to somehow prompt the LLM from our own prompt for it to understand that we need to make this structure. So basically this is what we want to implement inside this lecture. It won't be easy, but it will be fun. Let's get started. First of all, we need an implementation to make this kind of request from our API client or from our TypeScript code. And to keep things separated, I will write a function in this API client. First of all, as I said, we need some types for our order details. Let me write down the types. So if you remember, we wanted a sender and some contents, which is an array of objects with name and quantity. And now let's write a function that will simply make an order. I will write this function and I will call this make order. And this should return a promise of what? The question is what this function returns. Again, we have to look at the website. And if we look at the response, it will return us an object with success, with data, and basically the data contains our order and the message. In our case, we are only concerned about the ID of the order and about the message, and these two informations will be used by the LLM to give us back information. So let's say that with our function, we will return back an object which contains an order ID of type string. We need to put a success flag, which is Boolean, and we also need a message, which is of type string. Let's make this message optional. Alright, now we have some strong typings inside our function, also the function arguments and the function return type, so we are safe from a TypeScript point of view. Let's now make this request and let's wrap the request inside a try catch block. So what we have to do, we have to again make a request to our API. So I will say const response is await. We want to make a fetch request. And right here, first of all, we are starting with our base URL. And our base URL is this one, localhost 3000/API. But again, if we look at the website, the request goes to /API/orders. So this is our address that we need to handle. So right here, /orders, like this. And let's add some parameters to this function. Let's add the same headers, first of all. We have some headers, and this function, very important, will contain a body. And in our case, the body will simply be the order details. So I will call JSON stringify our order details. All right, this is our response. Now we have to handle it or to somehow make it a JSON. So I will say right here, const response JSON is our response, await our response.json, like this. And if everything is all right at this point, we can return what we have to return. Very important, we need to return an order ID, which it will be contained inside the response JSON. It will be inside the data entry, inside the ID. And also we need a success, which will be true. If we have an error, let's simply return the error details. All right, I had a typo right here, success with 2 S's. All right, this is our API call in order to make an order. Let's now let's not test this, let's directly use it inside a MCP tool. Hopefully it will work from the first try. And we have to create a new MCP tool. Let me make some room right here and write the skeleton of our implementation. Alright, and this is our first initial tool in order to make an order. The title is Make Order Tool, and we want to make an order at Awesome Pizza. That's great. A difference between this tool and the other tools that we build until this point is that this tool requires an input schema. So we somehow have to prompt or use this tool in order to extract this information, the payload, the ascender, and some contents. This is the catch inside this lecture. So we want to specify an input schema, which is an object. This object should contain some items, and these items are of type ZOD. We need to make this import because MCP in TypeScript makes extensive use of ZOD. All right. These items will be an array, which is an array of objects. So here I'll say Z object. And now let's add some specifications to this object. A name of type Z string. All right. And a quantity of type Z number, like this. This tool has also an output schema. and the tool should return back the order ID. So here I'll specify output schema. We should return back an order ID of type Z string. And this will be interesting to implement. Now that we are using an input schema and an output schema, we have access to these items inside our tool implementation. And this is one great advantage of MCP with TypeScript. If, for example, now I will select my items right here, TypeScript will know exactly what kind of object is these items. So in the body of this function, we have access to the items. That's great. So we can directly make the call. I will call const order response is await our API client. We want to make an order with an object that requires a sender, and our sender, let's just call awesome MCP as a sender. And we also need some contents, and our contents are our items. And if we don't have any typos right here, everything should be all right. So we have name and quantity. Contents should also contain name and quantity. That's great. We have still an error right here because we still have to return stuff from this function. And now let's see if we have an order success. So if we have an order success, if we have this, let's simply return an array with content. And this content is an array which contains an object which contains the type, and the type of this is text, and the text is our order ID. So I will say as text right here, order placed successfully, our order ID, and this is our order ID. I will also specify that we required a structured content for this order ID. So we want to specify order ID, and this is our order response order ID. All right. If things aren't successful, so else, we need to somehow specify that placing an order failed. Let me write the code. So if order is not successful, we will simply return a content with type text, and we will specify the reason the order failed. And we don't have any TypeScript errors. Everything should be all right. Let me save this implementation, and now let's test it. So if I will restart my MCP server, now we have 4 tools. That's great. Let me close everything right now. Start GitHub Copilot. All right. And I will ask, first of all, for the pizza menu item, I will ask what is the daily menu at Awesome Pizza. All right. We are getting the Awesome Pizza MCP. That's great. All right, and we have today's menu pizza. Now we are able, or we should be able, to invoke our other tools. I will say, I want to order 1 margherita and 2 pepperoni pizzas. Let's see if this will work, and we will receive this order. All right, and this is working just fine. We are getting the input that we wanted with our items. We have 1 margherita pizza of quantity 1 and 1 pepperoni pizza of quantity 2. Let's invoke this and let's see if we will receive a valid order ID. Let me run this. All right, and we have received the order summary. For some reason, I don't see the order ID. All right, it says that the order ID appears to be empty, so I guess there's a problem with the implementation. Let me pause the video and check it. All right, so I saw what the problem is inside the API client. I forgot to simply, if I specify a body, of course, I need to also specify a method. The method should be a post, like this. Let's save everything and let's restart the MCP server. I will restart the server. That's great. And now let me open again GitHub Copilot, clear the context, and ask one more time, what is the daily menu at Awesome Pizza? All right. And then I will say, I want to order 1 margherita and 2 pepperoni. Let's see. We will run this test. All right. And we are getting the order ID. Finally, this means that everything is all right. Let's move on into the next lecture and implement a tool that will check our order ID. So it's time to finish this MCP application. One last tool, an easier tool than the more complicated one in the previous lecture. Let's now create a tool that will extract the order ID and will return back the status. And the starting point, also as before, is the website that we are trying to imitate using MCP. And let's understand how the website works. Well, when we place an order, I click place an order, and now the website has a check or lookup order form with an order ID. If I check the network call that is made when we enter an order ID and we click lookup order, you'll see there's a fetch request, and let's look better at this request. We are making a request to our server API/orders, and then we are placing the order ID right here inside the request URL. We are also doing a get method, and as response, this is what we receive. Just as before, we receive a success flag, the data, and what is very important for us is the status, because we want to create a tool that will check the order status. So the first step would be to create a function that will make this kind of request, an get request to our backend with an order ID. For this, I will go into our API client and I will create yet another function right here. Right here, this is our function and I have called it check order status. It receives an order ID and it returns a promise of string. We are only concerned about the order status. Just as before, we wrap everything inside a try catch block and we want to make a response, a request. So I say const response is await. We will make a fetch request to our, first of all, to our base URL. So just as we did before, /orders, right here, /orders, /our order ID, the one that we get inside the function. So right here, I will say order ID. This is our request. Also, let's add some headers just as before. I will take the headers from upstairs, the accept and the content type headers, like this. And this is our response. Let's transform it into JSON. Await our response JSON. This is our response JSON. Let's make a check if we have a success. So if response JSON success, if this is the case, we can simply return response JSON. And if we look at the response that we get, the status is inside the data field, inside the status field. So here I'll say return response JSON, data and status, and make this as string. Else maybe there's an error inside the implementation or inside the backend response. So we should return back the message, and the message should say what the problem is. So response JSON /message, like this. And in case we have an error, again we simply return the error message that we get. Alright, this is our simple request to get the order status. If we have an order ID, let's now create our MCP tool. So lower down the line, this will be our very last tool. And I will call this, let me write a skeleton of this tool. So this is the skeleton of the tool. I have called server register tool. The tool name or title is check order status. Check order status, and the description returns the status of a order for awesome pizza, only one pizza, word right here, based on the order ID. That's great. We also need an input schema since we want to extract something from the prompt. So input schema will contain we are expecting an order ID of type zstring. Alright, and if we have an input schema, this means that also we have access to this order ID inside our tool function implementation. So right here we have an order ID, and we can use this order ID to retrieve the order status. So here I'll say const order status is await, and we have our API client. We want to check the order status with this order ID. Alright, and now we can simply return back an object containing an array, containing some content that is an array, which will contain an object. The type of this response will be text, and the text will simply be our order status. And this is our tool implementation. Simple as that. Let's see if this is working, and we can, at this point, we can test the whole workflow directly from our MCP implementation. For this, I will restart our server or start it. And now we have one more tool. We have 5 tools. So let's start. I will start GitHub Copilot. Let me clear the context, clear everything, and let's get started. I will ask what is the awesome pizza menu for today? And let's see. It will invoke this MCP for the menu, first of all. That's great. All right, I will say, I want to order 1 margherita and 2 pepperoni. All right, that's great. This is what we wanted. I will allow this. Okay, we are receiving our order ID, and now let's check the status of our order. So I will ask, what is the status of my order? And now it will invoke our new MCP, check order status, and I will allow this. And we have a received order, and our MCP workflow is complete. Alright, let's first review the starting project in Python. So this is an MCP Hello World project. What exactly are the requirements? Well, my assumption is that you have Python and the UV package manager installed. So if I called UV ---- version, I see something. In order to initialize then a UV project, you can call UV init inside an empty directory, and this will initialize your project. Then the only dependency that we will use throughout this section will be the MCP CLI. So you can call UV add and then MCP CLI like this. This is our dependency. Then what you have to do is to create 2 files, one that will contain basically your MCP server. I like to keep things separated, the MCP and then the actual execution of the MCP. So this is the initial MCP. I've created a tool with the MCP tool decorator, which can receive a name and a description, and we can attach this decorator to any kind of Python function. The import that we will be using comes from MCP server fastMCP. We need to build a MCP object like this. And then if we want to start or to serve our MCP logic, I prefer to do it in a separate file, a main standard IO. This is how I called it, main standard IO.py, in which I'm importing this server object from the MCP. From this server, I'm importing this MCP object, and then I'm simply running this object if the call comes from the main file. In order to test our MCP and to receive fast feedback, I'm executing this directly inside VS Code with GitHub Copilot. In order to do this, I have created a .vscode folder in which I have an mcp.json file, and this mcp.json file simply contains a server's entry, and we have this awesome pizza standard IO MCP server. The command is uv, and the arguments are run and main standard IO.py, the exact command that we would use to execute a Python file with uv. Let's see if this is working. I will stop this. I will start this again to see if it is working, and we will do this every time we will add a new tool inside our MCP. And now with GitHub Copilot, let me clear all the files to have a clean context. I will ask, invoke the test tool MCP. I will allow this, and yes, I can see this hello from MCP message, which I have configured right here. This one right here. So our starting project is working. The first tool that we will create will return us the menu for our awesome pizza. And how we can return this menu, and let's think about it, how the website returns this menu. Well, behind the scenes, the website will simply make an HTTP request to a backend that will return the menu. And we will do the same, but using an MCP tool. How is this working? If inside the website we right click and we click inspect, if we go to the network entry, let me clear all these entries and refresh the page. And at some point you will see there's a fetch request for the daily menu. And this is what we also want to do from inside our MCP. If we look at the headers, you'll see the exact URL that the website is taking and the method. And basically this is what we have to do. Make a HTTP request to this URL, and then the website will simply respond us with this data. Let's implement this with Python. It is fairly simple to implement. First of all, we need I will put the HTTP requests inside a new file to keep things organized and not to have too much code in one file. I will create a new file and I will call this API client.py because this will make API requests to our backend. And first of all, what we care about, we need a base URL. And if we look back at the implementation, you will see that this is our URL, the URL that contains the data that this website is displaying. So this is our base URL, maybe /API, because we will make only the API calls like this. And we want to make some HTTP requests. In Python, this is fairly simple by using the requests library. This import with requests library. And let's create a function that will return us the daily menu. So lower down the line, I will call def get daily menu. All right, this is our function implementation. And let's wrap everything inside a try catch or try block. We somehow need to make a request. So here I'll say response is requests. We will make a get request. First of all, we need a URL, and I will make this an f string. So a simple f string in which we start with the base URL, this base URL. And if we look back at the website, is /daily menu. So this is our address, /daily menu, like this. Let's also add some headers. We will add all these headers through all the requests that we will be making, like this. I will also add these headers. Very nice. And if there's something wrong, I will call response raise for status if the server responds with a bad status. Then we need some data. Let's extract the JSON data, basically this data right here. So we want to extract this data. Very nice. And let's call data is response JSON, like this. And we simply have to return this data. This is our implementation. Let's also add some exception handling. I will write the code. So if we have a request exception, we will simply return us the error. If we have a more general error handling, I will simply say unknown error occurred. Let's test this implementation. And in order to test this implementation, I will create a new file and I will call this test.py. And let's just import this right here. I will import this. So from our API client, I will import our only function for the moment, this get daily menu. And let's just simply print it to the console. So here I will say daily menu is get our daily menu, and let's simply print this daily menu. I will execute this file with uv run and then our test.py. Let's see if there's something wrong right here. Yes, it doesn't find my requests module. Why is that? All right, of course, I need to also import the requests library. It is not built in into Python. I forgot that. I need to call uv add and the requests library. And let's now test this implementation with uv run test.ts.py. All right, and everything is almost good. What I really want to return from our API client, I want to return our data, or let's just call this menu, and I want to return our menu.data. So one change that I would do, I would only return the data field from our menu. We are not concerned into the other data. So basically our implementation for the API request works. Let's now build our MCP tool. So inside this server, we simply need a new function. I will call this getPizzaMenu. And from our API client, I will import right here the getDailyMenu. Our menu is our getDailyMenu like this, and simply let's return this menu like this. And now we have to transform this into an MCP tool using the MCP decorator. I will simply copy it from upstairs. The name of this tool would be get pizza menu, and the description will be get the menu from Awesome Pizza. Like this, we are ready. Let's now restart our server. Inside this VS Code MCP JSON, I will start this or restart it if you already started it. Now with GitHub Copilot, let me close everything and ask, what is the menu at Awesome Pizza? I will allow it to run this tool. And yes, we are receiving the nice pizza menu. So everything works as it should. Let's now move on into the next lecture and do the same. Let's request the pizza menu, but this time let's see if we will be able to show also these images that the server returns. Let's now continue the implementation of our MCP server, and in this lecture we will still get the menu, but if we look at the response that we get from the site, let me show you the response. So if we go at the network, if you check the daily menu, we will also get an image URL, and this is the address of the image on the server. If, for example, I can even open one image inside a new tab, and I can see the address of the image inside the server. And we can take this address and somehow show images inside our MCP server tools. And this is what we will implement. We will implement a new tool that will get the pizza menu, but also with its images. Our starting point is the last tool. I will simply make a copy of this, and I will call this function getPizzaMenu with images. I will also update the MCP tool name and description. We want to get the pizza menu with images, like this. So the LLM will know when to select this tool. All right, and basically there's almost the same thing, but this tool implementation will be a little more complex and will need some special types from the MCP library. I will import them upstairs because we will build a more complex tool. I will import from MCP types a text content type, an image content, and a call tool result, just to have a more complex and correct, properly structured response. And at this point we are getting our menu, and if we look back, the menu is simply an array of entries with of objects, which object has a name, a description, and an image URL. So let's structure a little our return type, and let's say that this function will return a call tool result. All right, we are getting the menu. Let's create a content array that we will return back. This is an empty array. And let's now iterate over the menu that we received. And I will create a for loop. So for item in our menu, let's add one content for each entry of this. So let's add one content with the name of the pizza, one content with the description, and one content with the image URL. So for this I will call content append. We will append a new element right here, and this will be a text content. The type of this will be text, and our text will be our item, and inside the item we will get the name field. The same we can say for the description, so I will copy this line right here, and we will also add the description. Alright, and now we somehow need to extract the image URL from the response. If we look, the image URL from the API call looks like this, but on the server it looks like this. So it somehow looks like localhost 3000 /assets/ and the name of the file. For this I will build this image URL and I will hard code it for the moment. So our image URL is an F string from our address, and then we append our image URL to our address localhost 3000. And let's somehow save this image somewhere. So I will call this image response is requests. Let's import the requests library because we need to make a call to also load this image. So requests, we have the option to get this image from our image URL. And now we need to convert the image to base64. And in Python, this is pretty easy to implement. We just need this base64 import. So I will also import it upstairs. We have this base64, and we encode our image response, the content of the image, and we decode it in UTF-8. And what this basically will do, will convert our image into a base64 string. So this is a string that can be understood by the MCP server. And in the end, when we have this image data string, we can simply append it to our content. So right here, I will call content append, and this time I will specify an image content. Let me make this bigger. So right here we have a type, and the type of this is image. We have some data, and the data is our image data, our base64 string. And very important, we need to specify a MIME type, and this MIME type is PNG. It's like the extension of our image, this one right here. And basically our implementation is done. We still have to return something from this function, and I will return a call tool result from our content. So here will be content is our content array. And we basically are good to go. This is our implementation. Let's see if it is working. For this, I will simply restart our MCP server. Now we have 3 tools. That's great. And let me inspect this in GitHub Copilot. I asked it what is the menu with images at Awesome Pizza. And the LLM understands that it needs to execute this tool. Alright, there's an error. What's the problem? I guess I have some error. Let me check it. Alright, and my code had multiple problems. I was able to find them all. The first problem is that I forgot to specify the type of type text right here inside the text content. The second problem was that the MIME type of our images should be image/png, not png. And the last problem was the indentation of the return of the function. This is the correct way. I was before returning directly inside the for loop, and this meant it only handled the first entry inside the loop. Let's see if this is working. So inside GitHub Copilot, I will ask, what is the menu with images at Awesome Pizza? And let's run this tool and see what we get. And yes, this looks much better. So we are getting the response. Everything looks all right. GitHub Copilot still has a problem directly printing images right here, but we can see them right here. That's very nice. So we were able to write a tool that returns images in this lecture. Let's now continue our implementation, and this time we will create a more complex tool. A tool that we will use in order to make a order to our awesome pizza website. And why this tool will be more complex? Because it will have to extract what we want in terms of pizza and send that information in the exact form that the server expects. It sounds complicated, but with the assistance of MCP, of Python, and with some types for Python, things will be easy to implement. So how does placing an order function on this website? If, for example, I have these buttons right here, let's say I want to order a margherita pizza and 2 pepperoni pizzas. If I go lower down the line, I have the option to enter my name. I will enter my name, and I have the button to place the order. And let's observe the network call that will be made when we place a order. If I click this, I will see that there's a request to the backend. Let me make this bigger. So there's a request to localhost 3000 API/orders. So this is our backend. But what's very important is that we are now sending also a payload. So we are attaching something to our request, and that something is the contents of our order. In our case, we need to specify the sender name. I specify the sender name and then the contents, which is an array of elements which have a name and a quantity. So if we want to implement this in MCP with Python, the best approach would be to also have some types in Python, because MCP is really friendly, or types are really the friend of MCP. With them, it will understand a lot better, and the LLM will understand a lot better what exactly we want to do. So the first step for us would be to have some types for our request to make sure that we are making the right request. For this, I will go into our API client, and from upstairs, I will build some types. And what we will have lists and typed dict from the typing library. Alright, let's now build some types, and I will build them lower down the line. Usually when building types, the first or the most logical approach is to start with a lower or the most simple type and then gradually move to the more complex types. And in our case, the most simple type is this one, the order entry, which is simply an object which has a name and a quantity. And this is what I will do. I will create a type, and these are classes in Python. So these are simply classes over this typed dict, and this class has a name and a quantity. So this is our order item. Now we want to also specify the order details type. And the order details should contain some contents, which are an array of an order item, and a sender, which is a string. So I will create yet another type, and this time is called order details. I will call this order details, which has a sender of type string and some contents, which are a list of order item. And basically this is what the request needs in order to send to the backend. Now we are able to write our function, the function that will send something, that will send an order to the backend. All right, and this method will be called makeOrder, and it will receive a argument of type order details, and let's return back a string. All right, what we have to do, we simply have to make a request, just as we did before. We need to make a request, but we also have to attach our order details to our request. So let me wrap this inside a try. So we want to try to make a request, so I will say response is our requests. We want to make a post request to our URL, and let me take this from upstairs because there's some typing to do. So we want to make a request, but this time to the orders API, to the orders backend, the same headers. And we also, this is the key difference right here, we will also specify a JSON which will contain our order details. This will be attached to our request. That's great. Let's now also, if there's something wrong, I will call response raise for status if something is wrong, and let's extract the response JSON is our response JSON. All right, and we should return back from this, we should return the order ID. So I will return, let's return something containing an object containing the order ID. So the LLM will know to display this order ID. And if we look back at what we receive, if I look at the response, we will receive an object containing some data, and this will contain an ID. So we need to go into the data, into the ID. So our order ID is our response JSON. We need to go into the data and into the ID. This is what we have to send back. And let me also write some exception handling right here. So if we have some exceptions, I will simply send back the error. That's great. We are now ready to use this function and create a new tool. So in our server pipe, let's create a new function. First of all, a new function, a function that will make an order. So lower down the line, I will say make order. And this function will receive some items which are of type a list of order item. And I will import this. That's great. And this should return back a string, the order status or the order ID or some error. And we simply have to make the import from API client. So I will import this from API client. I will import our make order function. Now I will simply execute this function, and I will call this order response is our make order. We want to make an order, and let's make this order, and this function requires a sender, and the sender, let's call this MCP user, and also the content of this call is our items. And these items will be extracted by the LLM. So this is the most interesting thing that the LLM will do. And let's return back, return our order response, and we should return the order ID from this order response. Like this. This is our function, and now we have to decorate it in order to make it a tool. So I'll call MCP at MCP. This is a tool, and what we have to do, I will specify the name and the description. The name is make order, and the description make order at Awesome Pizza returns the order ID. Let me save this and let's test this implementation. So I will start or restart the MCP server. Now we have one tool more. I will invoke GitHub Copilot. I will ask again, what is the menu at Awesome Pizza? Let's start with this information. All right, I will ask, I want to order 1 margherita and 2 pepperoni, and this will invoke our newly created make order tool. Let's see if this will work. And very nice, this is very interesting. The input is exactly as we expected. We have some items which are an array of objects with name and quantity, exactly what we wanted and exactly what the server expects. Otherwise, it won't work. Let's see if this is working. All right, and it worked from the first try. That's great. We have made a request and we have received back an order ID. I can even check this order ID. Let me copy this inside the website. Also, there's an lookup option order. Let me paste this order ID and I will say lookup order, and you will see we have this MCP user who put this order. Let's now move on into the next lecture, our final tool, a tool that will simply receive this order ID and return us back the status. Alright, and it's time for our final tool for this project. In this tool, a more simple tool, we will implement an MCP tool that will check the status of our order. Let's first see how the website does this. Again, if I enter an order ID right here, And if I click lookup order, I will receive back the status of our order. Let's see what network requests this action takes. And if I go to the network tab inside my website, if I click lookup order, you will see I'm making a request to our backend API orders, and then the order ID is simply put in the URL of the request. This is a get request, and the response will simply return us back an object with a data and with a status. If, for example, we are entering a order which doesn't exist and we call lookup order, we will receive back an error not found. Alright, let's implement this inside our MCP tools. As always, we first need a function inside our API client, a function that will basically do all the work. It will check for the order status, and this function will be called check order status, and it will receive the order ID and it will return us back a string. Again, we try to make a request, so our response is requests. We are making a get request and we should build our URL. Let's, as always, make this a f string, which first of all receives our base URL. Let me take it from upstairs. So this is our base URL /orders / our order ID. So this is our request. Let me also steal the headers from upstairs. This is the one. All right, let me add these headers like this. And just as before, let's raise for status if something is not all right. Okay, and let's transform this to JSON. So response JSON is our response to JSON. All right, let's just make this a, let's check for success. So if the response JSON will return us back a success object, so if we have a success field inside our response JSON, then we should return back the data status response. Just as we have it inside the response, we have a data entry and then the status. This is what we care about. Else, let's simply return us back some errors. If we don't have an OK, we should simply return, hey, unknown error. And as always, let me handle the other errors. This is always the case when working with APIs. If we get some exceptions, let's simply return us back the exceptions. All right, this is our API call. And let's now build our tool. This will be our most simple tool. Let's just say like this. So let's create a tool that will check order status. So I will call it def check order status. This one receives an order ID of type string and will also return a string. And what we have to do, we have first of all to import our method. I will import right here, check order status. Let's invoke this function. So here I'll say status is our check order status with our order ID and simply return the status. This is all the tool implementation. Let's also annotate it as a tool. So at MCP, this is a tool which will simply contain the description of our tool. The name, check order status, and the description, check the status of an order by its ID. And basically this should be it. This is our final tool. Let me restart the server. Now we have 5 tools and let's start our workflow from the beginning and see the full workflow. So I will first ask what is the menu at Awesome Pizza. We receive the menu, very nice. Let's ask for a order. I will ask, I want to order 1 margherita and 2 pepperoni. That's great. Just as before, we should receive an order ID. And from this context, now we can ask, what is the status of my order? And let's see, it should invoke this check order status with this order ID. It was smart enough to extract this order ID from the conversation. I will allow this. And yes, we received the correct status. That's great. So this was our final tool, and all our workflow now can be executed from our MCP client.